This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. Japan eyes another record-breaking defense budget with a major boost for counterstrike capabilities. Big money also pouring into AI, automation, and troop welfare to tackle a recruitment crisis. The Philippines and Vietnam agreed to elevate military cooperation with the neighbors and ASEAN members at odds with China over claims in the South China Sea. Typhoon Shanshan downgraded but still pounding Japan with relentless rain, triggering flood and landslide warnings and prompting millions to evacuate. Now, China is said to be thinking of letting homeowners refinance trillions of dollars in mortgages in a bid to free up cash and boost consumption. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, a video game sensation, Black Myth Wukong driving a shopping spree in China. It's giving domestic consumption a much-needed boost. Could the phenomenon also mean greater investment in locally made hardware? Japan's defense ministry is seeking a budget of 8.73 trillion yen, or about 60 billion US dollars, to boost defense capabilities in the next fiscal year. It's part of a 5-year plan to raise defense spending in the face of growing regional tensions. CNA's Michio Ishida has more.
Japan laid out plans for a defense buildup worth 43 trillion yen, or about 300 billion US dollars, over 5 years back in 2022. The increase in spending sought to strengthen Japan's missile and standoff defense capabilities amid a more complex security environment, citing threats from China, North Korea, and Russia. Next year's budget aims to support information gathering. For the first time, the ministry is requesting a budget for the development of a satellite constellation system to detect and monitor targets. The Self-Defense Force also wants to upgrade its integrated air and missile defense systems, as well as its unmanned and cross-domain operation capabilities. And it is seeking to purchase more equipment and ammunition and build defense-related facilities. The Defense Ministry says its deployment of the upgraded Type 12 surface-to-ship guided missile will begin in the next fiscal year, a year earlier than planned. Its acquisition of Tomahawk cruise missiles took quicker than expected, too. They will be installed on Japan's destroyers from the next fiscal year. As part of plans to prop up defense capabilities, the Self-Defense Force is also trying to attract new recruits. It wants to raise wages and allowances for full-time and reserve personnel, and offer scholarships to talented engineers. That's after missing its recruitment goal by half in the last fiscal year. The Finance Ministry will screen the draft budgets from the various ministries and send them to Cabinet for approval by December. Michio Ishida, CNA, Tokyo.
And for more insights, let's bring in Tomohiko Taniguchi, Special Advisor for Jitsu Future Studies Center and Specially Appointed Professor at the University of Tsukuba in Tokyo. Welcome to East Asia Tonight, Professor. First up, I thought I'd perhaps get your thoughts on the latest defense budget request. It's a record high of $59 billion. Do you think, Professor, that the recent airspace incursion by a Chinese intelligence plane had anything to do with it?
The short answer is very little, because that's been a daily phenomenon that Japanese airfighter pilots scrambled to deter incoming Chinese aircraft. So that was not new. What was new was that the reconnaissance aircraft of the Chinese military made an intrusion into Japanese sovereign airspace. That was new. But if you look at the sea space again, then you see almost daily Chinese official vessels, 3-4 vessels, are entering into either Japanese contiguous waters or sovereign territorial waters. So Japan is faced with this intrusion of the kind that's been unprecedented for over about 10 years. And the budget increase you're talking about is something that people are talking about with a buzzword of we've got to do this now before it's too late. Before it's too late is the buzzword.
Right. And part of that, announcement was the fact that how Japan's military is grappling with this severe recruitment crisis. And in response, the government says it's proposing investments in AI, automation, wage increases, and all of that. Professor, do you think these measures are actually sufficient to reverse this trend, or do you think there are more fundamental issues at play here?
Money is very much important, and the amount of money to be increased is not sufficient. And ironically, Japan's job situation is very good. It's the total perfect employment is the economic situation you have because of the steps made by the previous Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Abenomics has worked very well in terms of increasing job opportunities for the young. So public sector, especially the defense ministry, defense agency, defense forces, have been struggling very much hard with the private sector in terms of hiring high school and college graduates. So the steps made for the next year's budget are important, but that's going to be far from enough.
So then how do you think, we keep saying it's a record-breaking defense budget, but still, compared to some other countries and compared to the GDP, it's not that high. But how close do you think Tokyo is in terms of achieving its goal to modernize and better equip its forces to be a credible deterrent in the region?
In order for Japan to develop its deterrence capabilities to the fullest, there is very limited amount of things that you could do alone by yourself, unless and until you team up with like-minded partners. The United States, obviously, Australia, the Philippines, increasingly, and the South Koreans. So Japan must work hard to develop its deterrence capacities on top of the budget proposals that you're talking about. As regards to budget proposals, I would say there is a broad consensus in a rather bipartisan way. So the increase you're talking about is going to be implemented rather frictionless, in a frictionless manner next year. And I would hope that the year after next. But even that is not going to be enough because of the huge gap you're talking about between China and Japan. And as you say, Japan is faced with North Korea, China, Russia. That's not the kind of neighborhood you could envy.
Right. And you've mentioned it's a huge gap between China and Japan, and that's why partnering is important. So, Professor, how does partnering with how do you think this increased defense budget actually will help its neighbors like the Philippines, as you've mentioned, with all these regional security challenges? And is it enough to make a real difference?
The question is it going to be a real difference? Yes, the answer is we must make a real difference, but by working closely with those nations you mentioned. The Philippines pose an interesting case here because it's becoming more like a hub of alliance networks. The Philippines, Japan, the United States. Philippines, Japan, Canada, the United States. Philippines, Australia, Japan, and the United States. And India is also interested in working with the Philippines. So the Philippines, Japan have been much closer, and the Japanese have been providing in a baby step way, although providing the Philippines with, military equipment.
Professor, so the U.S. and the Philippines, they said that they've got a range of options to deal with these so-called gray zone tactics in the South China Sea. So with Tokyo also facing similar issues with Beijing, do you think such an arrangement could possibly be expanded to Japan? And is there a need to?
There is an increasing need and awareness among the Philippines, Japan, and the United States to maximize the combined capabilities of these three nations. Because at the end of the day, Taiwan, if you look at the island, is sandwiched between the Philippines and Japan. And the Philippines and Japan have both been very much close militarily to the United States. So the equation here is very much simple. The Philippines, Japan, and the United States must work together and do as much as they can as regards the gray zone warfare, preparedness, and so on.
Always great speaking to you. You might need a glass of water for that scratchy throat there. Thanks so very much.
Sorry about that.
No worries at all. Appreciate your time. Tomohiko Taniguchi from the University of Tsukuba in Tokyo. The Philippines says it will boost military collaboration with Vietnam, marking a significant step by two countries that have overlapping claims with each other, as well as with Beijing in a disputed South China Sea. The defense chiefs from both sides have agreed to enhance cooperation on disaster relief at sea and military medicine. Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. says the two countries maintain their commitment to a peaceful resolution of tensions in the South China Sea. He says the visit by Vietnam's defense minister will elevate relations with the two sides now working on defense and maritime cooperation, as well as trade. The Philippines has been sparring with Beijing in recent months over territorial claims. Manila, since Mr. Marcos took office, has turned to Washington to help bolster its claims, much to Beijing's displeasure. Vietnam has its own maritime disputes with China, but the two communist neighbors have maintained close relations. Hanoi and Manila have overlapping claims in the Spratly Islands, but have worked towards avoiding conflict. In January, President Marcos visited Hanoi to sign deals to prevent incidents in the South China Sea. Both sides have also set up a joint Coast Guard committee and a hotline for tackling disputes. Well, earlier this month, the Philippine and Vietnamese Coast Guards held their first ever joint exercises, simulating firefighting drills and search and rescue exercises. Now, for more on the new defense cooperation, our Philippine correspondent, Bueno Benal, will be joining us at 8 p.m. Singapore, Hong Kong time on Asia Tonight. China has released a survey report on the Sabina Shoal coral reef in the South China Sea, disputing Philippine claims of damage caused by Beijing. Well, the report instead says that Manila's own anchored vessels has an adverse impact on the environment, adding that Manila's illegal beaching of warship in the area had gravely damaged the coral reef ecosystem. China conducted the survey from May to July this year. It also says that Philippine Coast Guard vessels left behind garbage bearing the country's logo in the area. China earlier released two reports on other parts of the contested sea. The first was on the second Thomas Shoal, where it said coral reefs are exposed to high levels of heavy metals and oils, allegedly discharged by a grounded Philippine warship. The second report touches on the Scarborough Shoal, asserting that coral reefs there are healthy, likely in response to Manila's allegations that Chinese fishermen had destroyed its marine environment. Sabina Shoal is the latest flashpoint between China and the Philippines in the major waterway. Now, over the weekend, a collision between Chinese and Philippine vessels took place as Manila attempted to bring supplies to Filipino fishermen. More than 5 million people in Japan remain under evacuation orders as an intense storm lingers on in the southwestern part of the country. Though Typhoon Shanshan has been downgraded to a severe tropical storm, torrential rains and strong winds are still battering the region. At least half a dozen people have been killed and some 80 others injured. Eyewitness videos from Kyushu, which is the most severely affected regions, show trees uprooted and signboards dented. The slow-moving storm is expected to approach the central and eastern regions, including Tokyo, around the weekend. Winds were roaring at more than 250 kilometers per hour at one point, pounding Kyushu, one of Japan's 4 major islands. Some 250,000 homes had their power cut off on Thursday, but services to many have reportedly been restored. Train services and flights in and out of the country have been affected, stranding passengers.
今の気持ちはもうとにかく焦ってます。やばいなって。これから何する？とりあえず上司に電話してタクシーで向かうか何かしら手段探します。
就是通知我们就是去退票，然后我们又重新订机票，我们也很烦恼，不知道怎么办这样。就是在日本又多待了1天这样，后来看得到新闻。 新闻说我们台湾的飞机根本就没办法下来日本，在那盘旋40几分钟，然后又飞回去了，所以我们就在赶快忙着要找路线回家。
Coming up on East Asia tonight, Japanese steelmakers are urging the government to look into ways to curb Chinese imports, including slapping anti-dumping duties. China's market watchdog ends an antitrust review against e-commerce giant Alibaba more than 3 years after charging a record multi-billion-dollar fine. Hello again. You're watching East Asia Tonight right here on CNA, and it is now time for your business news with Roland Lim. And Roland, I believe reports have emerged that China is thinking of letting its homeowners refinance their mortgages. What's that all about?
You heard right. A move that this could potentially reduce borrowing costs for millions of families and hopefully free up some cash to drive consumption. Now, it signals another effort to look at ways to arrest the slowdown in the Chinese property sector, now into its 4th year of a downturn. Now, this move would enable homeowners to negotiate terms with their current lenders ahead of January, which is when banks usually reprice mortgages. Now, for the first time since the global financial crisis, homeowners could also be allowed to refinance with a different bank. Now, China's cutting of mortgage costs in recent years have predominantly helped new home buyers. As such, the plan reportedly being considered is aimed at existing homeowners who have missed out on the cuts to key interest rates. Following the central bank's encouragement last year, authorities have been ramping up efforts to reduce mortgage costs. Now, banks implemented a rare rate cut on outstanding mortgages on first homes, but lower mortgage rates could hurt the profitability of Chinese banks. Still, officials are pressured to consider such steps in order to halt a housing-led slowdown. The report lifting general sentiment towards Chinese property counters, even though analysts say they don't expect material boosts to new home demand as the refinancing affects existing holders. Shimao and Wang Ke soaring in Hong Kong today. Shimao ending the day 10.5% higher, while Wang Ke is up nearly 10%. Greater China stocks rallying from near 7-month lows on confirmation that Chinese sovereign wealth fund, that's Central Huiqin Investment, had been buying. The State Bank Fund's mid-year report shows it raised its shareholdings in a couple of blue-chip exchange-traded funds. The Shanghai Composite closing out the day 0.68% in the green. Shenzhen all in the green as well. Hang Seng Index getting a boost. Now, China's market watchdog has completed its antitrust review of Alibaba, ending more than 3 years of scrutiny. It's also praised the e-commerce giant for compliance. Now, back in 2021, the State Administration for Market Regulation fined Alibaba a record $2.8 billion after concluding its practices had hindered competition. Alibaba said that the end of the review marked a new starting point for the group. US-listed shares currently trading more than 4% higher. China's aviation sector has shown significant recovery, with domestic travel surpassing pre-pandemic levels. And while international air travel remains a drag, the country is expecting air passenger trips to reach a record high this year. CNA's Tan Se-hui has more.
It's all systems go as a new maintenance facility for business jets opens at Dasing International Airport. It includes a 5,000 square meter air-conditioned and heated hangar that can accommodate as many as 8 business jets at any one time.
But today really signifies the beginning of business aviation and general aviation in the fact of we're opening the maintenance facility to support business aviation here at Daxing. It's one of the only airports, international airports, that has unique dedicated space for business jets. So there's huge growth potential in terms of the development here at Daxing.
Beijing's Dasing Airport is located 46 kilometers south of the city center at the border of Beijing and Langfang, Hebei province. It opened in 2019 and is one of the newest international gateways to China. Business jets like this one make up a very small proportion of the total number of planes that arrive here at Dasing International Airport. Commercially, Dasing International Airport was built with the intention to become one of the world's busiest airports. But the COVID-19 pandemic put a spanner in the works. Now, with international travel reviving again, China's overall aviation sector is set to recover. And every trip counts as China seeks to lure back international air travelers. According to official data, China registered nearly 350 million passenger trips in the first half of this year. It's a 24% increase compared to the same period the year before.
China's aviation sector experienced a very great recovery post-pandemic, and it is largely benefit from the pent-up demand during COVID. For instance, like the past second quarter of this year, domestic air passenger have already exceeded its pre-pandemic level by 10%. But the international air passengers still lag behind. Now it's only about 85% of its pre-pandemic level.
It's not just foreign arrivals that are slow to return. Chinese travelers are also making fewer trips overseas.
One, because I think the appetite for international travel has not reached pre-pandemic level for the reason that the Chinese have become maybe more canny, more aware about spending money overseas. The yuan has weakened compared to pre-pandemic level. And also that there is, I said before, a decline of at least 50% on flights coming in from North America to mainland China. That's primarily because of geopolitics. And I suspect that will be the case until there is more clarity, until the U.S. presidential elections on November the 5th.
With ongoing tensions in the Middle East and Europe, as well as the recent surge in Mpox cases globally, the global aviation industry is bracing itself for turbulence. But China may still be better placed to weather the currents.
The Chinese has the advantage of having a large hinterland. They don't really need the outside world to sustain the aviation business.
Even as international travel has yet to fully return to pre-pandemic levels, officials say the country could expect to see record high air passenger trips this year, reaching 700 million. Tan Sihui, CNA, Beijing.
Singapore's Sovereign Wealth Fund, GIC, says it has bought a logistics facility in Japan without providing the cost. According to Nikkei Asia, the deal is worth $400 million. The move comes as the Singapore investor looks to diversify its supply chain in Asia's real estate market. Located in the port city of Yokohama, the fully occupied facility was developed by Daiwa House Industry. Spanning more than 126,000 square meters, the four-story property is one of Daiwa House's largest assets built to date. The purchase is the latest in a series of acquisitions by GIC of other warehouses in Japan last year. They include 6 warehouses across Japan, which Nikkei Asia says were bought for more than $800 million. Japan's steel industry is grappling with a surge in cheap imports from China, prompting urgent calls for government action to protect the domestic market. Now, Nippon Steel is leading peers in the lobbying efforts, as Vice Chairman Takahiro Mori urged the Japanese government to consider measures such as anti-dumping duties. Now, he's warned that Japan's steel market is in a dangerous position which will head the wrong way if it's not protected. Imports of ordinary steel by Japan, the world's number 3 producer, surged 17% to 1.32 million metric tons in the April to June period, with shipments from China jumping 43%. China's steel exports are expected to rise further as domestic demand falls. The world's biggest steel producer has exported 24% more in the first half and could ship 100 million tons for the full year. The US, Europe, and South Korea, among others, have all implemented curbs on Chinese steel imports. Separately, Mr. Mori said that Nippon Steel is pushing ahead with its $14.9 billion acquisition of US steel, aiming to finalize the deal by the end of this year. The takeover is expected to boost Nippon Steel's profit by as much as $277 million in the first quarter of 2025. Market action, the yen nudging higher to their closely watched 145 per dollar level after weakening yesterday. Investors betting on more rate hikes after Tokyo's inflation picked up pace for the fourth straight month. The Nikkei 225 ending the day 0.7% higher. Now, with the close of the last session in August, the Japanese benchmark posting its widest monthly trading range in 34 years. And that's after wild price swings earlier this month following the BOJ's rate hike and U.S. slowdown concerns. The rest of East Asia also rising as economic data from the U.S. calmed recessionary fears. The tech-heavy Kospi added 0.5%, TAIEX joining the advance, ending with a trade of 0.3% gain. And you're up to date with the business news.
Thanks very much for that, Roland. Well, we're going to go for a short break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, how a Chinese video game sensation may have an impact on the chip war with the U.S. in the long term. Japan eyes another record-breaking defense budget with a major boost for counterstrike capabilities. Big money also pouring into AI, automation, and troop welfare to tackle the recruitment crisis. The Philippines and Vietnam agreed to elevate military cooperation, with the neighbors and ASEAN members at odds with China over claims in the South China Sea. And Typhoon Shanshan downgraded but still pounding Japan with relentless rain, triggering flood and landslide warnings and prompting millions to evacuate. Well, 2 other storms have struck the archipelago in the past month alone. These events, along with the now lifted threat of a possible mega quake, have led to soaring rice prices and shortages across parts of the country as residents scrambled for the staple to boost their emergency stockpiles. Some stores have resorted to limiting sales, and the government has jumped in to caution against panic buying. Well, that problem partially stems from low-priced yields last year due to a searing summer, and fears are the situation could worsen with climate change. Well, some local officials are hoping to stave off future supply shocks by introducing a special breed of its famed grain. Farmers in Saitama Prefecture, just north of Tokyo, are working on a government-led initiative to grow a breed of heat-resistant rice called Emi Hokoro, or Beaming Smile. Some 30 rice fields have been planted with those grains as a trial.
さまざまな県からさまざまな高温耐性を持つ品種を分譲していただいて交配に利用しています。高温耐性を持つものというものがこれまでなかったため、その高温耐性とその絆より細の絆より少し遅いものというのを目標に育成してきました。
Well, high heat is not only a cause for concern in Japanese agriculture. Farmers who toil under the sun for hours daily are just as vulnerable.
毎年毎年暑さ更新しているような状況ですし、不安っていうのはやっぱりありますが、どうしても時期が決まっているものですので、やるべき時に暑くても何らかの対策して、外に出てやらないといけないので、不安を感じながらもやるしかないかなっていうふうに思ってます。
Last month, heat stroke hospitalizations among Japan's farmers and fishermen surged fivefold in a single month. Elderly workers, especially vulnerable, face the greatest risk as they make up 70% of the 1.4 million farmers. But even as temperatures rise, work still needs to be done.
熱中症に騒がれていますので、やはり農家の方々もその通り、気をつけて、やっております。できるだけ昼間は避けてもらって、朝晩動いてもらって、そういう形をとっております。
Well, to tackle rising temperatures, a Japanese company claims to have the solution for keeping outdoor workers safe. Well, tech firm Skinos has developed a wearable device that alerts users to potential heat stroke. It tracks perspiration, skin temperature, and heart rate, allowing supervisors to remotely monitor workers' vitals. Well, the device also provides warnings of impending heat injuries and reminders to stay hydrated in the sun.
4リットルとか5リットルとか発汗が出る方もすごくおられるんですよね。なんですけども、意外とその水分取られてる量っていうのは、1リットルくらいだったりだとか、それに満たないくらいっていう方の方がすごく多いもんですから、そういったような方というのは非常にもう脱水のリスクが高いというようなところがございますんで、こういったようなデバイスをご利用いただいて、しっかりと水分補給に努めていただくというところで、熱中症のリスクっていうのは下げられるのかなというふうに考えておりますね。
And now we turn to a smash hit that has captivated many globally. The video game titled Black Myth: Wukong. From game consoles to faster and more advanced computer hardware, Wukong has triggered a buying spree for more gaming-related components in China. While the boom plays into China's desire to boost domestic consumption, as CNA's Laura Nong finds out, it may even have an impact on the chip war with the US in the long term.
For his peers, Bai Zhebang is in an enviable position. With a job at this internet cafe, the 21-year-old's got access to advanced tech that lets him play China's first blockbuster video game, Black Myth: Wukong, in its full potential.
跟家里面的不一样，然后家里面的话只有笔记本，配置的话没有这种主机电脑性能要强，想要升级的意愿吧，暂时是可能。各种情况，经济还有来回挪动的话，玩家也不方便。
Inspired by the 16th century novel Journey to the West, Wukong players control the monkey, who is on a quest to gather relics to unravel his destiny as a legendary hero, against a backdrop rich with ancient Chinese heritage and culture. Within a week of its launch, it hit the gaming top seller charts and outperformed other big-budget names in areas like concurrent players and copies sold. Lauded for its impressive visuals and attention to detail, what can make or break the game's experience on PCs are these graphics processing units, or GPUs. They handle complex calculations to render high-end graphics and can cost a few $100s on average. Playing without them is nearly impossible, with severe lags if the specs aren't up to par.
其实大部分游戏像普通的407、304都能带得动，可能黑神话它的画质要求比较高，所以就要可能40以上才能带得动。
While there are gamers like Zhebang who have turned to internet cafes, there are also many others who have upgraded their computers just to play the game, boosting sales of machines several times more expensive than a normal desktop.
我们昨天的销量啊，就是卖的比较多一点，比较大的。
According to local news reports, graphic card sales have up by 200% on year on the day of the game's launch. Posts with this hashtag saying the game has boosted sales of graphic cards has been viewed over 20 million times. PS5 consoles too and other related electronics have seen sales increase by at least 80% on year in the days leading up to the game's debut. The game itself costs about $60.
Which is quite a lot of money for most people in China, but you see the number of players. Certainly people realize, wow, people have the money if they want to spend it, right? Others may want to get their PCs ready with various upscaling technologies. And also another thing I wanted to point out, the best GPUs and all the upgrading technologies are all made by the Americans.
This includes NVIDIA, which has been caught in the crosshairs of the US-China chip war. Due to US sanctions, NVIDIA only makes available downgraded versions of its GPUs to the Chinese market. Despite that, the chip giant has not been left out of the Wukong boom. In an unconventional move, it offers bundles to let buyers get the game with the purchase of one of its select GPUs, a promotion not extended to those in China. Industry observers said given the game's popularity and demand, Chinese developers will have more incentive to find ways to get into the growing market.
The game, developing the game, playing the game has become a tech feast. It actually encourages grassroots, bottom-up investment, technology, and knowledge to develop more advanced chips in the future. Because now in the past, it was always top down, so the Chinese government would heavily invest in the chip industry, right? But then you realize whatever the government-driven initiatives would normally not lead to somewhere productive, and therefore this kind of bottom-up factor when working with the top-down factor, I'm thinking that's what the policymakers are thinking in their mind. That would lead to something down the track, which is the advanced chips manufacturing capabilities in the future.
The move comes amid efforts to advance China's computing capacity. The city government of Beijing, for instance, in April said it will provide subsidies to Chinese companies to buy locally made GPUs as it seeks to achieve greater control of the supply of intelligent computing resources.
So let's chat more about this and bring in CNA's Lauren Wong, who is based in Beijing. So, Lauren, we can tell that a lot of positive feedback on the game. We see that it clearly enhances China's soft power. But we also heard from your report, and based on that it may even have implications for China's tech self-reliance and at the same time is also welcomed by the authorities. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, it's very much in line with what we've been seeing the past couple years. Dating back to 2018, the US sanctions on advanced computing and semiconductors have only heightened. And in the case of GPUs, which is not only used for gaming but also AI processing, Chinese firms have had to get creative. And most recently, we've seen some Chinese AI firms mix GPUs using different chip tech, mixing different chip tech to individual AI servers, and also to get through loopholes, buying access to use sanctioned hardware in US soil. So it's pushed innovation in that front. But at the heart of Beijing's ambitions is to wean off reliance. And China is good at manufacturing older generation chips, which you see in cars, which you see in household appliances, but it's still years behind in terms of advanced manufacturing chips. So this domestic demand for gaming and as a result for its gaming GPUs, the hope is that there's sort of a ground up additional boost to really break frontiers in this sector. And even so, like the tech giant, chip giant NVIDIA, it first started out as a gaming GPU maker.
That's correct. And I believe this game has also boosted consumption all around. So tell us, what does that include?
Well, the game itself has sold over 10 million copies in the first 3 days, making it one of the fastest selling games of all time. And aside from the game consoles and the tech, coffee and actually tourism have also been getting a boost. An example being the Luckin coffee chain. It features 4 drinks specially crafted for Black Myth Wukong, and one of its variations has over 5 million cups sold on the first day of its debut. And when you walk around in Beijing, you go to the Luckin shops, sometimes some of the drinks are sold out. And also the people in Shanxi province, they're getting increasingly excited. It's a place where over 3/4 of the location is featured in the games. And this province is in the northern part of China with a population of over 30 million. It's known for producing coal, and it has a GDP per capita just below the national average. But it has historical buildings, and most of the historical buildings across all of the provinces in China. And I spoke to one of the people who actually grew up there. He's a blogger on Chinese social media, Xiaohongshu. He said that normally there isn't much people visiting these sites, but since the game's launch, he's seen on TikTok, social media, more people flocking to these areas. And according to Trip.com, searches for the area's scenic sites have up by about 200%. So to get a sense of what the blogger has been experiencing for his post promoting the Shanxi province, let's listen to what he has to say.
我收到的最多的评论其实是震撼，就是之前很多人可能没有去感受到这个雕塑寺庙带来的震撼，然后我通过我的一些拍摄的一些手法，让他们真实的感受到了，哇，这个地方也原来也这么好看，这么震撼。 让大家有了更多的了解，说哦，那比如说这个夏天或者有时间的话，我一定要去旅游一趟。
So we do see more people checking out, the scenic sites. But what about the gaming industry itself? Tell us some of the impact, because the industry itself has come under various clampdowns throughout the years, hasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. All this comes after the headlines you've been hearing over the past couple of years, including restrictions on the game's content, the in-app purchases, as well as time limits for underage gamers. And all in a bid to prevent gaming and gambling addiction. But according to industry observers, Chinese firms have actually found mobile games to be more lucrative in this landscape. It's more casual. It requires lesser money to invest upfront, and you can earn a big buck from in-game purchases. But a game like Black Myth Wukong, it shows how a big title game can bring success not only in China but also globally. But still, it's apt to note that a big game like this requires many years of production. It requires a lot of money and also support. And this is one of the games that has actually seen support in various fronts, like, for example, Lucking Coffee, as well as local state media. And it's on a scale that, at least for one analyst, that she has never seen before. Let's listen to what she has to say.
And you got also importantly got the Chinese official media's support. So all the Chinese official media actually are behind the promotion of Wukong, of the Black Myth Wukong. They're all just saying high praise of it, etc. So you can see this coordinated effort because Wukong actually, the Black Myth Wukong aligns so well with the government strategy to tell the Chinese story well with Chinese stories that tells Chinese tradition, cultural values.
Also, despite all the perks the game has brought, the traction and the longevity of the hype remains to be seen. And actually, when I visited that internet cafe, not many people were playing Black Myth Wukong. And the staff actually told me that the boom was actually about 2 days since its debut. And after that, not many people were playing it. And indeed, the game typically takes about 50 hours to complete in its entirety, according to some gamers. So the extent the game that has taken years to make the imprint it last still remains to be seen, Noteli.
Right. And perhaps the people are just drinking their Lucking Coffee. Well, thanks so very much. CNA's Lauren Ong there, reporting to us from Beijing. Well, time now for another short break, but coming up next on East Asia tonight, recent violent unrest across the UK, putting the spotlight once again on the rise of the far right in Europe. A closer look at how Singapore could be affected. This week, we've been analysing the roots of the recent riots in the UK and examining the lessons learned. So far, we've looked at anti-immigration sentiment and the role of disinformation. Today, we put the spotlight on far-right ideology, something that's seen in politics and populations, driven by personalities and socio-economic issues. Could a similar movement gain traction in Singapore? Well, CNA's Rebecca Mateo reports.
The similarities between tech magnate Elon Musk, influencer Andrew Tate, and UK political activist Tommy Robinson aren't immediately clear. But a quick scan of their social media posts shows a history of content that can be deemed far-right. Another connection: all of them stoke anti-immigrant sentiment after news emerged about an asylum seeker who apparently killed 3 girls in the UK town of Southport. In Mr. Robinson's case, he continued to push the narrative, even after it was revealed that the alleged killer was a local teenage boy. Mr. Robinson, who's known to be anti-Islam, even led protests in the violent aftermath of the killings.
I think some people on the far right see them as heroes. More than what they say, it's the fact that they've got a voice and the fact that they've got connections and they're able to share things through social media networks and through email lists. And that allows news to spread and that allows people to mobilize to cause violence. So it's not that Tommy Robinson says we should do this and therefore we do it. It's Tommy Robinson told us that this is happening, and therefore let's get involved.
For some politicians, such as the Reform UK Party's Nigel Farage,
whether the truth is being withheld from us,
nationalist ideology has a ready audience.
This give a voice, political voice, and also legitimate the message. Sometimes it's the one issue thing, Maybe it's just about immigration, or it's just about anti-Muslim or religious view or race view. It start with one issue, and after that it open a little bit bigger, bringing families and people that were not really committed or not really inside of this group, but seeing this movement as a part to going towards the good direction.
According to UK political watchers, the far-right movement there has roots in fascism. Over time, these have evolved to address more modern issues, but traits like opposition to liberal values, national glory, and sometimes violence have remained. When things come to a head, communities like this one in Liverpool have to pick up the pieces. In what was a rare bright spot, residents of various backgrounds came together to clean up after the rioting and reassure minorities of their safety. City officials also put aside political differences to condemn the violence as racist and criminal.
We were really keen to come together across the political parties and actually show that there's much more that unites us than divides us. And whilst we might have different political views, we might represent different communities in different parts of the city, at the end of the day, we all strongly believe in democracy.
Singapore has not been spared from radical ideology brought on by the pervasiveness of the internet. In fact, 2 cases in recent years were linked to far-right extremism. Both involved teenagers who plotted to carry out attacks, and both were dealt with under the Internal Security Act. There are other measures. Laws exist to counter hostile information campaigns if foreign actors attempt to sow discord in Singapore's communities. In such cases, the authorities can direct internet entities to help in investigations, take down content or suspend accounts. There's also POFMA, which targets fake news in a similar way. One expert suggests a softer approach to be taken at the same time.
There are so many sites. It is important to build individual and community resilience, develop critical thinking, digital literacy, to understand best practices in knowing how to evaluate what one reads or views online. I think the social media space is particularly important, and how to engage. You can't run away from social media now because it's very much part of our world.
When it comes to political discourse, experts say Parliament has proven to be a useful, moderating platform, especially when discussing foreign talent policies.
When such issues, potentially sensitive issues, are discussed in Parliament, it is important that the debates are conducted constructively, in a way that is respectful, in a way that comes up with potential solutions that are actionable, implementable in the context of our globalized, diverse, multicultural society.
The message is clear and consistent. Singapore has zero tolerance for hate speech, a position often repeated by the country's leaders. Anything otherwise puts the very fabric of Singapore at risk.
A time now for your Paralympics update. And the women's individual compound open elimination in para-archery has just wrapped up. China's Zhou Jiamin beat Ireland's Kerry Leonard. Leonard, sporting Ireland's green uniform, fought an impressive fight, scoring 135 overall. But with the final arrow, the 2016 gold medalist Zhou scored 140 to win the match. Brazil's Jane Carla Gogol defeated Filipino Agustina Maximo Bentelok. Bentelok is currently placing 32nd in the world ranking for archery in the compound women open category. First Filipino archer to qualify for the Paralympics, she was one of the flag bearers at the opening ceremony. Well, next, a competition between Poland's Ksenia Matikanova and Bangladesh's Joma Akhtar had to go into a shoot-off after they were tied at 1-3-8. And X marks the spot. Poland's para-archer Makitatova walking away with full score, eliminating Bangladesh's Akhtar. Nevertheless, a bittersweet moment for Akhtar, who walks away with respect from fellow para-archers, for she took up the sport less than a year ago. In para-athletics, there was a new world record and a double podium finish for Brazil in the men's 5-kilometer T11. Julio Cesar Agrippino ran the 5K in 14 minutes, 48 seconds, smashing the world record set by fellow Brazilian Jacques Yeltsin. Well, Yeltsin came in third after Japan's Kenya Karasawa. Now, this has been an emotional achievement for the visually impaired Agrippino, a world silver medalist in long-distance running. He competed in the 2016 and 2020 Paralympics, but couldn't win a medal. But today, he finally adds the titles Paralympic gold medalist and world record holder to his CV. With the first set of medals finding their recipients, this is how the tally is shaping up. China leads the table with 4 gold medals. Britain and Italy both have more medals overall than China, but just 2 gold ones. Singapore is sharing the spot with quite a number of countries that have 1 gold medal. And that does it tonight, or East Asia tonight this Friday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. Have a great weekend.